Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Good morning. I'm Gana. I'm part of the product specialist group at Informatica. I'm here to talk about master data management. And as introduced by Excel in the beginning, at the beginning of this session, there is a lot of confusion on what exactly is MDM. There was once a case where I was personally involved. I went to a customer place thinking they wanted to know about MDM, master data management, and it turned out to be metadata management. So, there's really a lot of confusion around the word MDM. What we are going to see today is, what exactly is MDM at a very high level. We would then go into details as to how Informatica. Okay, this thing's not working. Yeah, so we'll look at what Informatica has to offer for MDM. We'll see how Informatica's MDM covers most of the requirements or business cases that you might have in a master data management environment. And we will also see how Informatica's MDM plays along with the overall platform story of Informatica. So if this gets going, yeah. So that's the agenda again. What's the need for MDM? Why do we really need, why do we think of MDM in the first place? And then the concept of universal MDM, or what we call as universal MDM. So that's going to talk about how the MDM, Informatica's MDM offering is going to support the universal MDM need. And then finally, the platform story as to how MDM and the rest of Informatica's platform works hand in hand. So let's get started. Here we see what are the common MDM related challenges. So let's start with the regulatory pressures. As most of you might know, there is constantly, every few months, there is a new law being passed. There is a new data privacy rule that gets going. So there's always pressure for you to report to regulators in a way that makes sense, in a uniquely identified way for customer data, for risk reporting and things like that. So that's one of the major drivers, especially in the case of in banks and financial institutions and so on. Regulatory pressure is one of the major drivers for master data management. Moving on, this part here talks about the need to rescue existing technology investments. So what do you mean by that? Most of the systems, or MDM as a whole, has been a journey which has started from data warehousing, and the next step is what is MDM today. So most of the customers and most of the enterprises generally have some sort of investment already in place for ERP, CRM systems, data warehouses, business intelligence systems, and so on. But the idea is these systems contain multiple versions of your unique golden truth. So it's not golden anymore. It's like, you can call it silver or bronze or whatever, but it's not golden. And there is no unique way of identifying a customer in all of these traditional investments and traditional systems. So that leads us again to MDM, because you obviously want to come up with a mastered version of your data. It could be customers, it could be products, it could be anything that you can think of. And then, think of an MDM implementation in your enterprise, right? The other important driver in this area is mergers and acquisitions. So, as Mark touched upon, there have been multiple instances where companies have acquired other companies in the same domain, and then they have n number of applications to be integrated with. They have constantly, multiple versions of the same customer sitting across various systems. So that's a very strong driver for master data management initiatives. The next one is missed revenue opportunities. So if your data is not golden, if there is a lot of data redundancy, then obviously there's going to be wrong marketing campaigns, not reaching the right person, not marketing in a proper way, things like that, which again leads to a leads you to think about having a master data system in place which would take care of reducing redundancies and deduplicating your data. And finally, costs, reducing costs, as we saw in the equation from Mark, the return on data. So, your call center employee picks up the phone, he sees multiple versions of your same customer. One place he's got his address, one place his personal details, and so on and so forth, constantly doing shifting across the screens, and which is not an efficient way of doing business. So reducing costs is another driver which makes people to start thinking about master data management. So these are not the only drivers. So obviously there will be drivers which are specific to your industry, specific to your domain, and so on. But at a very high level, this is what is driving the MDM space today. So what do we have to offer as Informatica to address these challenges? So the question in everybody's mind is, what do I need to master my data? How many products do I need? And what is the end goal? So let's look at the possible things which could impact this decision. So the first one is the number of domains that you're going to master. We call it the domain. In fact, the MDM market calls it the domain. So what it means is any data which is of importance to you, which is shared across systems, and which constitute a single logical entity. So in this case, it could be customers, it could be products, it could be location data, it could be chart of accounts, it could be reference data which you manage internally. Anything that you can think of where the data gets shared across systems would qualify as a domain. So there are multiple needs. Even within the same enterprise, you might end up having multiple versions of customer data. For example, in a banking environment, the asset management division and the investment banking division should not be looking at each other's data, customer data. So there is a Chinese wall in between, and they might end up having two customer masters in place, which again brings the question back as to how many domains do I need, and how do I master these data sets in my organization. The next area of consideration is what style of MDM do you want to implement. So it could be a registry style, which is more like a link which you maintain. It could be an analytic, an MDM system which supports analytic decision-making processes. It could be a coexistence style of MDM, wherein you've got a registry implementation as well as a multi-domain implementation. So you've got a link style MDM as well as custom master, for example. Or it could be transactional support MDM, wherein you have transactions sitting in a separate area, and you have got customer master data in your MDM system, and then you use this data set to come up with a unique view of your data set. So that's the second need. And moving on, the next one is, once you have decided what domain you want to master, what type of mastering you want to go for, the next is where do you place this MDM system? So it could be on an internal IT infrastructure. It could be federated in the sense you could have multiple instances of MDM in various locations, various regions, and so on. You could have MDM in the cloud or MDM as a service. So each one's need is unique, and you might end up having multiple versions of these or the way it's deployed. And finally, as I said earlier, most organizations have traveled in this journey from a data warehousing world. So most of them have investments in data integration, data quality, and data services. So it's always helpful if you can reuse what you've already built. What's kind of getting back something from your older investments. So looking at all of these, we came up with this title for our MDM solution, which is, or a concept rather, which says Universal MDM, wherein the product addresses all of these needs. And we are in fact proud to say you don't really need multiple products, but just go with one MDM, which can address all of these unique needs in your case. Right, so let's look at the various, driving things in more detail. So for example, the first one is the cross-domain relationships. or what are the domains that you want to master. So let's take an example. In this case, you have a supplier. So it could be any example, but something, this one relates to a manufacturing and a retail world, wherein you have a supplier who says there was a production run sometime back in the past which was faulty. So what it means, so for you, it means that you got to go and look at what are all those parts which you source from this particular supplier during that time period when the faulty run occurred. What do you do next? You go and see which all products these parts went into. So you might have, say, N products, but then not all products might have used these parts. So that's another thing to look at. And once you have decided which all products have been affected, then you go back and see who all purchased these products from you. So basically your customers who have bought products from your company. So you go and identify these customers. And next, you also want to know where they are located. So they might be diversified. They might have a billing address, and they might have a shipping address. So you need to obviously know where these products are shipped to and who is your point of contact and stuff like that. And then finally, you got to decide what is the substitute part and from which supplier you're going to source this substitute part to put back in your product and then send it back to your customers. So this is a scenario which can happen in any industry. It's a very common situation. So what does it mean in terms of MDM? So this in MDM world translates into these domains. So there is a supplier domain. You got to know who all are your suppliers in a unique fashion, in a way that you can say, okay, supplier A means this guy, and I know who this is. In the same way, you've got a parts domain, you've got a products domain. These could be the same domain if based on your enterprise. You've got a customer domain, location, and a supplier. So the idea is you've got, just with a simple example, you've ended up with like 5-6 domains. And the idea is how do you plan to master these domains so that you can make meaningful relationship out of these. Again, Informatica Mdm allows you to basically have multiple domains in the same system and then also have meaningful relationships across these domains, which allows you to look at, start from a supplier and go back the whole cycle, come back to the supplier who are going to source again with. So the next topic was obviously the style. What style do you want to implement? And I already touched upon the banking example. So here's the use case where this is an existing implementation of Informatica Mdm, and it's one of our most referenceable customers. So what have they done? This is again a combination of merger and acquisition. That was the driver. And then when two banks merged, each one had its own MDM system in place. And they had to come up with a solution which would link these two MDM systems together. So these two MDM were obviously two different products. One was Informatica's, and the other one was one of our competitors in the acquired bank. So what happened is they had to decide on how do they come up with a golden record in the organization. So, or a truly golden record after the merger. And they decided to go with Informatica's registry style MDM implementation, which would basically link to other MDM implementations and come back with a multi-styled implementation. So one of the MDM installations was MDM Hub, and the other one Hub style, and the other one was Link style. And then we were able to come up with a unique customer view for the merged entity, right? So the next one is multi-deployment. So what do we mean by multiple deployments? The idea is that you deploy it wherever you want, whenever you want, and however you want. So let's see some examples for however you want. It could be a federated MDM. So that's the one on the top. So each use case is different. So for example, you might have, even within Turkey, you might have various regions where you have your branches currently located, and each one might have its own specific data-related data privacy rules, for example, or specific region-specific details, and you may not want to hold all of those in a centralized location. So Informatica MDM allows you to have a federated version of your MDM implementation, which can exist in multiple locations at the same time, synchronized back to the back with a centralized location for a unique customer view. And the next one is where do you want to have the MDM? So MDM in the cloud, this is totally supported. You've got use cases like initial data load for performance-related reasons, wherein you want to see how your system behaves under certain load. You also want to do some user acceptance testing, UAT scenarios, wherein you give the instance in the cloud for your business users, and then they use the cloud environment. They can access it from wherever they want. And also use other services in the cloud along with the master data. And the final part is basically using MDM as a service. One use case that I can think of is, which is often used, is in the world of Salesforce. So if in your enterprise you have something which is Salesforce or something related to, or something which is exactly similar to Salesforce, then you have a requirement wherein you create multiple customers. You create customers without really knowing if the customer exists in your database at that point in time. So what this leads to is you end up having duplicates of customer in your Salesforce environments, and this leads to lots of issues. And this is a common scenario in most organizations, wherein their Salesforce account looks like the same customer name repeating multiple times. So MDM as a service addresses this need, wherein you have the mastering component embedded in Salesforce.com, for example, and the Informatica MDM basically matches the newly keyed in customer data, comes back with a match found or not. So basically you can decide at that point in time if you're going to create a duplicate or are you going to use an existing customer found within the database. So that's really helpful, and that kind of avoids creating duplicates at the starting point rather than mastering it later. So these are the various deployment modes that are supported, or use cases which are supported. And finally, the multi-use consideration. So what do we mean by multi-use? As I said earlier, you might have data quality rules based on Informatica's data quality product, or you might have existing power center mappings or whatever you might have already created using Informatica's platform. And Informatica MDM basically allows you to reuse those resources across your MDM flow. So you can reuse your data quality cleanse rules within the MDM environment. You can use the same cleanse rules to master your data. You can use the same Power Center mapping to load your MDM tables. You can use it for accessing data as well as delivering data. So again, this works in a real platform story wherein the existing investment doesn't go waste and is cleverly reused in the MDM implementation. So, as I said, all those rules and reference data can be reused across the products. So what does it tell you? One of the truly multi-domain player in the market, which supports all of those considerations that we looked at. And yes, you just need one MDM product because the market is so crowded with multiple MDM products from the same vendor, wherein they have one product for product mastering, one for customer mastering, one for locations, and so on and so forth. And you end up with, again, multiple versions of MDM, which is not what you want to achieve. So that's one of the takeaways. Moving on, we'll look at how MDM fits into the Informatica platform story, how we reuse our existing technologies, how we work along with our Power Center products, our data quality products, and all the rest of the platform. So the first one, which is again going back to the mega trends Mark was talking about, is social media and social networking related data, which needs to be linked with master. You don't really want to look at Facebook feeds for your master data. But look at those use cases at the, on your left, and you can relate to at least one of those. Like you might want to know who your customer, what your customer's sphere of influence is, for example. You might want to know who's the common link across your customers. And then what is the relationship? How can you go to another person starting from one person? So this whole idea of relationship management makes more sense when you start taking data in from all these social networking sites, for example, Facebook and Twitter and so on. So you have been already using MDM for databases or your existing applications, bringing in data, mastering data. But then this new dimension of social networking is where the real value lies if you're looking for relationships and making better marketing campaigns and so on. Right? So that's one real strong use case. What does Informatica have to support this? Obviously big data, so you have connectors currently which can hook up to these social media sites. So you have Power Center connectors which can hook up to Facebook, to Twitter, and pull data, and then you can look for data that is of interest to you, and then use it in your master data environment to make more sense of your existing customer data, for example. Right? Moving on, the traditional world of Power Center. This is something which most of you might be already familiar with. Power Center connects to everything and anything and everything. Basically, you can have you can have any kind of source, any kind of target in any platform, and then Power Center basically does the job for you. So how does it work with MDM? Again, as I said earlier, we can reuse Power Center's transformations and logic or mappings in the MDM world. You can use them to provide data to the master data system, as well as take data away to other external providers from the MDM system. Right? Related to Power Center, there is also the B2B data exchange component, which is, I'm not sure how famous it is here, but the idea is that it allows you to parse PDF files, it allows you to parse Word documents, and make sense out of those documents. So it can be a complex XML, for example, or a really structured flat file. It could be a PDF, it could be a Word document, and B2B basically reads from any of these sources. And what we got with respect to master data management is we have created adapters which are specific to the industry. For example, for the financial services industry, we have got adapters which can write data in fixed format, in Swift format. We can read FPML data set coming in from market data and sources like those, complex XML files. Using the B2B adapters, these are pre-built, and then load this data into a master data system. So that's one very good use case. And this is something we are seeing in the pharma space as well, wherein there are so many formats and so many mandatory standards which need to be followed. Right? Data quality. This is another important topic for the MDM world. Let me start with how data quality helps MDM. So you might view data quality and MDM as the same, but it's not exactly the same in the sense data quality allows you to standardize data in a particular format. So let's take an example of an address. If you're getting addresses from two different sources, and you've got street name sitting in various attributes in these two different sources. From one source, the street name reads the street name and the house number, for example. And in the other one, it's just the street name. The house number is in another attribute. So what happens is, unless you have a standard way of having your address, unless you say my first attribute always has street name and the address or the house number, I'm not going to be able to match and merge it and come up with a deduplicate program with this data set. So what data quality allows you to do is to standardize this data set, look at this data set in the first place, profile it, and standardize it to an extent that it says now you've got address in line 1, the street name, and then the house number in the second attribute. And by doing that, you're letting the MDM do its job of mastering, wherein it knows, okay, I'm always going to get the street name in the first attribute. So I can go ahead and do a fuzzy match on the street name, and then my match score is obviously going to be that much more higher. So you are improving your chances of finding duplicates by standardizing data in the first place. And data quality plays a really important role, as it allows you to profile data, look at the current data quality set, have scorecards which talk about how your data looks today. And then in the future, once you've mastered the data, you can again relook at the same scorecards to see how it has improved by mastering your data set. So out of all the products in Informatica's platform, IDQ, or Informatica Data Quality, is one of the most highly used product hand in hand with MDM. And there is a good reason for doing so. On top of that, the data quality tool also allows you to, also provides you screens for the business user, which makes it that much more easier. The business user is the guy who owns the data. So he can see his data in an easy to use format. He can run profiling, simple cleanse rules. He can write his own set of rules to see how data can be better cleansed by applying those rules, and this really helps. Next up is a concept called federation, or having a virtualized view of your data set. So how is it important in the MDM world? You've got, say for example, your transactional system or your data warehouse currently. You've got you've now introduced a new master data system in the mix, and the next step is obviously to make use of your unique mastered golden record along with the transactional data to make more sense of it, because the master data on its own is not going to really help you much, because you're just holding a unique record. How are you going to use it? And the way you use it is to mix it with your transactional data or your operational data, whatever, which makes more sense for reporting for other third-party applications or downstream applications as you move on. What product used from Informatica's platform in here? That would be the Informatica's data services option in the Power Center product set. So that allows you to have a virtualized layer which links MDM and the transactional system in this example, come up with a virtual view of combined data set, which can then be provided to your downstream applications. Next up is complex event processing. So you can think of, as Mark mentioned, the same example. I was in Turkey. I use my credit card now in Turkey. And within 5 minutes, if the same credit card is being used in, say, Germany, then there is some problem, because obviously he's not traveling in 5 minutes to Germany. So complex event processing takes care of all these business-related rules which happen, all these events which happen over a period of time, and alerts you if something's potentially wrong. So this has real good use cases in the public sector, in places like the police and all those security-related areas where you got to constantly monitor people's activity or some shortlisted people's activity and so on and so forth. How does it work hand in hand with MDM? You've got your customer data, for example, mastered. You want to know what happens to this customer as events. So, you got to react to these events. You got to know if a status change happens for this customer, or if an address change happens to this customer, then you go to the new address, not to the old address, for example. And finally, this is another area which is of real importance with master data management, is the Ilm Archiving Technology. So this is, again, another of Informatica's products, part of the platform. What it does is to allow you to basically archive, subset, and have data privacy rules on your data. And this is, again, really important in the MDM world, because with MDM, you're going to constantly audit your data set, have big history tables, so on and so forth. So there is a real need for archiving, and also for regulatory purposes, wherein you need to maintain data for more than 7 years in banks and things like that. So this is a solution which helps you achieve archival of your master data. Again, subsetting, this you could think of taking production data, using it for your testing purposes. So you don't need a full set of production data for testing, but rather a small subset of that data set which can be used for your MDM systems testing, for example. And finally, the privacy issue, wherein you would have an option of masking your data set so that your customers' information like credit card and SSN and things like that are not publicly visible, and you can have masks on those data sets. This again works hand in hand with the MDM system and is a real value add when you think of a real MDM system in your enterprise. So in summary, we are one of the fastest growing market leader in the industry. This is based on Gartner's and Forrester's reports, the analyst reports. Universal MDM, it does support multi-domain, multi-style, multi-use, and multi-deployment. So you can just go with a single investment and use it as per your needs. And then it is comprehensive. It covers and makes use of the whole Informatica platform, which obviously has benefits in your organization. So with that, that's it. And you can reach out to me or Comtaj for any questions on master data management.